Hello everybody and welcome to the second part of the program very inventively named Jan's Opening Clinic. Format is simple. Premium users of Chess24 leave their questions in the comments of the news article, preferably about a chess opening, and I will answer them. Because of the huge demand in my opening expertise, we've had to change the rules. It's only one question per comment per user, whatever that means. And I think we'll just get started. One disclaimer before we get started. I'll try to keep an eye on the chat, but normally I'm quite caught up in actually talking about the chess line, so I won't be able to interact that much in the chat. We'll see how it goes. Here's the first question by J.V. Ferreira, International Master. What do you think of the Scottish Opening? Not a very concrete question, sir. Let's put it on the board. E4, E5, knight f3, knight c6, d4. I don't think it's a problem for black. I think the big problem black has in this position is and will be bishop b5. I think they play a bit more of Scottish because they don't know what to do against the Berlin or the Marshall. But I don't think it's dangerous. I believe the best move for black here is the move knight f6, and in all the sharp lines after knight takes c6, b takes c, e5, queen e7, queen e2, knight d5. I believe black is doing fine, but it does have certain surprise value and the positions are very non-standard, so it pays for black to be prepared here. I don't think it's a scary opening. I think later on we'll have a more concrete question about one of those lines. I'm surprised at the highest level. People don't play knight f6 all the time. You see quite a bit of bishop c5 or even bishop b4 check, where I think white has better chances for an advantage. But no, I don't think the Scotch, or Scottish, I never know what it's called, is all that scary. Hope that answers your question. Dustin93 is saying, oof, this is more concrete stuff. Hey Jan, my question is about the 7g4 variation against the Semi-Slav. I'm quite fond of playing like this with white, but there are still some issues to solve. What is your opinion on 7h6? Let's put it on the board. Let's see if it is. d4, d5, c4, c6, knight f3, knight c6. e3, knight bd7, queen c2, bishop d6, and here the move g4, popularized by, I think, Shabalov and Shirov at some point in the 90s, before white started playing g4 in every position out there. And my opinion is that black is fine after h6. I'm with you. I think h6 is the best move. And then the question continues. I can't decide whether to go for rook g1, bishop d2 or h3. I would prefer rook g1, but e5, cd5, knight d5 looks pretty okay for black, unfortunately. Thanks in advance. Yeah, once again, I think I agree. I believe bishop d2, d takes c4. This used to be the hot line a while back, but nowadays black is considered to be totally fine after bishop takes c4, b5, followed by bishop b7. And this pawn weakens the white position quite a bit in many lines. So I think that's nothing. I believe h3 instead of bishop d2. It's a decent move to play, but nowadays if black plays e5 and knows what he's doing, it's more or less forced equality. There was some older game, Yakovenko against Leko, and I haven't seen any big improvements on that. So rook g1 is the move they're playing these days. And yeah, black should go e5, I agree with that. After c d5, I'm not sure. I thought the critical move here was c takes d5 instead of knight takes d5. Knight d5 I never trusted all that much. I thought this was the main line, bishop b8. And what do they do here, g5? I think something like g5, takes, stuff like that, which is a total mess. I believe black is kind of alright, but it is a very tricky position to play. Sometimes I also try bishop d2 instead of g5, yeah, I think, sorry. In this position, bishop d2. There were some games recently. It's a mess. I think black is fine, but I believe rook g1 is the one space to look. So, yeah, I don't think white is better after g4, h6, but these positions after rook g1, e5 are complete chaos, and they are certainly playable. cd, knight d5, I'm not so sure. I think white has some chances there. So I hope that answers your question, at least to the best of my knowledge. Bit of a disclaimer here, my knowledge is quite old on this g4, h6 stuff. I haven't looked at it for a couple of years, because somehow no one's doing it with white anymore. Moving on, what's the next question? Here we are, Robert823. Hello Jan. Oh, praise. As we know, I like praise. I enjoy and appreciate everything you do with Chess24, if you knew. I am a d4 player and struggle against certain openings with an early c5. For example, d4, knight of 6, c4, c5. Don't we all? Nah, I don't think we all, actually. I've tried all sorts of things. Knight of 3 and e3. Don't try e3, that's already important. But always get a worse position out of the opening. Why is that? I assume the reason for this is that I simply don't understand the strategy in such openings. Can you explain some of the strategy behind such an opening and perhaps give a suggestion for white? Or is there a way to avoid such early c5 tries? Thank you and looking forward to more of your videos. They'll come. Thank you for that. I don't know, it's not a very specific question. The first issue you have to decide for yourself is, do you want to push d5 in these positions or not? For me, objectively, I think d5 is the way to go. You grab a lot of space, but quite often I don't feel like facing whatever they play, the old Indian or the old, what's it called? Old Benoni, Czech Benoni, I'm not even sure. Or the modern Benoni, or even the Benko. But I think in all these openings, if you are properly prepared, you have good chances for an opening advantage. And the plan is normally to grab space, control the center. So that's not very concrete, but d5 is the most critical move. I quite often avoid it and go knight of 3 when I also like white. cd4, knight d4. Black has very different setups here. He can go knight to c6, followed by e6 or e6 immediately. Or he can decide to play with g6. But I think white has very decent chances for an opening advantage in all of those lines. So the strategies are not the same for any of those lines. They can become very different, and this is more move-by-move stuff. After e6, already depending on what move you choose, the game can go a completely different way. You can go g3 here, you can go a3 here, you can go bishop f4, you can go bishop g5, you can go knight db5. So this is quite concrete. But if you have a look at it and find a move you like, for example, g3 is what Nakamura just played to beat Karjakin in Zurich, then there is quite some scope here. And similarly after g6, once again you have to decide between playing with g3 and with e4. I think white has very decent chances to get an advantage in all of those lines. And some people are afraid of some gambits like e5, but for me that's what I'm hoping for. If I'm white and they give me a pawn on move 4 like this, I'll be a happy camper. So yeah, you gotta choose which one you like, and if you want to avoid all this stuff at all costs, maybe don't go 1 d4, but go knight f3 and then c4 and knight c3, so this early c5 does not hit your d4 pawn. It's a move order thing. I go either way depending on where I think my opponent is most vulnerable. But yeah, I'm not quite sure from your question which stuff bothers you. So I think it's a matter of taste. If you like playing a close structure with a space advantage, go for 3 d5. If you like more concrete stuff, go for 3 knight f3. What's next? Vorteliax is saying, Dear Jan, I play 1 knight f3 as white. I do that too. Whereas with black, I play the Caro-Kann and Nimzo-Indian. I'm trying to decide what to play against 3 knight f3 if my opponents don't allow the Nimzo-Indian. Yeah, a lot of people, me included, have the same problem. I have narrowed it down between the Queen's Indian and the Queen's Gambit declined, aiming for 7b6 Tartar cover if allowed. I enjoy solid positions with minimal risk but chances to outplay my opponent. What would you recommend for me? I don't know, we all enjoy solid positions with minimal risk and chances to outplay the opponent. I think it's a bit of a question of time as well. The thing is, I normally go d5. The promise here you have to cover more ground. If you want to play the Queen's Gambit declined, you have to be ready for knight c3, bishop e7, bishop f4, knight c3, bishop e7, bishop g5 as you mentioned, and for the Catalan after g3. So there is quite some territory to cover. Objectively, I think it's all fine, even though in the Queen's Gambit declined, especially white has a couple ways to make life very, very dull. Let's say castles, e3, h6. If white takes here, there's not all that much black can do to spice it up, but that's live in most solid setups with black. So b6 objectively, well, you could argue about that. b6 is perfectly playable. But for me, it's more aesthetically pleasing to play d5. But if you go b6, the main move here is g3. You got to be ready for a3, but that's not considered dangerous nowadays. g3, and if you play a positional line here, let's say you play bishop b7 and not even the trendy bishop a6, then you can get your solid position without a lot of theory, while knowing, without a lot of risk, I'm sorry, while knowing less theory than after 3d5. So as a practical choice, I would probably go for this. Of course, a theory here, but it's not that huge, and it's quite playable for black. While as a theoretician's choice, I would probably go for 3d5 and try to hold my ground there. Then there's also always considerations. Is my opponent lower rated? How much risk am I willing to take? And so on and so forth. Objectively, fine with both. Personally, I'd go Queen's Gambit, but I actually recommend Queen's Indian if you want a ready-made repertoire. Yeah, there was that. What's next? 111 Marcel is saying, "Dear Jan, really appreciate your clinic. Keep the praise coming. Thank you, guys. What do you think is the most critical line for black in the anti-Moscow right now? Or do you have any kind of special weapon for white after 5h6? 5 bishop g5 is a must. I'm looking for a tricky variation from white's perspective. My ELO is about 2200. Thanks in advance." Sorry to disappoint you once again. I don't have any kind of secret weapons here. My problem with bishop g5 is you have to be extremely well prepared, not only for h6 but also for dc4, the Botvinnik, which I think is doing quite alright at the moment, and the move knight bd7, although admittedly here you need less theory. And after h6, I don't know. According to my knowledge, bishop h4, black is doing okay these days. So what they normally do, and what I would probably do, is bishop takes f6, queen takes f6. Here the theoretical debates are around these lines with e3, g6, and bishop e2 or bishop d3, where the eternal question is, does white's lead in development and space advantage way higher than black's two bishops, or the other way around? Personally, I think white is slightly better, but I wouldn't mind playing it with black that much either. So this is kind of the big battlefield where they go nowadays. A tricky line, if you want a tricky line that I've played a bit, is the move queen c2 here. It's not that good, but the idea is after knight d7 you go e4, d takes e, queen takes e4, and white probably is a bit better. Well, if black knows what he's doing, they normally go dc4, but here after e3, b5, a4, how is this line? Black had to be quite precise and really know his stuff in order to survive. So this is a line worth looking into, now bishop e2 or knight e5, where white doesn't have a lot of risk and he can still pose some problems for an unsuspecting opponent. Not sure that's the type of stuff you're looking for, but that's a line I've dabbled with, which I think is a very decent surprise weapon. Else, sorry, yeah, in these bishop g5, h6, bishop h4 lines, I'm kind of blank. Yeah, I saw that. Sorry, checking out, talking to Jose here, who's keeping me in touch with what's going on out there. Some more questions in the chat. Not a lot of them, though. It doesn't seem like anybody's really watching, or let me scroll through it. Nah, not that much going on, but I have plenty of questions from the comments, so I'm actually happy not to get too many new questions from the chat, and I'll just keep rolling. Raffaello is asking, he's asking a lot of questions, but he later said that I should choose the one I like best. I'll just go with the first one. He says Moin, which is what us German people from the north of Germany say to greet each other, believe it or not, Moin. Some questions about the modern Benoni. 1. Why isn't it seen on top level anymore? Gashimov contributed some great ideas, but since he passed away, it seems to me nobody cares about the Benoni anymore. Is there a specific line which makes the top level players avoid the modern Benoni? I'm not sure there is. I think, and you mentioned that in later parts of your question, it's a bit of a practical thing too. After e6, knight c3, c5, white just has a lot of setups that are dangerous. If this knight is not committed to f3 yet, d6. Here white has quite some options that are very hard to deal with. f4 is always a move. I personally like the setup with knight e2, knight g3 a lot here. So very few players at top level are going to go here and defend this whole territory. Well, after 3 knight f3, some people still do this, right? I see it a game once in a while, c5. That is there. The problem is also, if someone does this and you're white and you know he's going to do this and you don't want to allow it, then most people, and I know a lot of people, me included, who go out of their way to avoid the modern Benoni, they just won't allow it. They will either start with 1 knight f3 or 1 c4 and say, okay, good luck playing your Benoni against this move order, for example. So you see a lot of behind-the-scenes stuff where white players are saying, no, this stuff is too dynamic, I'm not going to go into it. And that might be one reason. You need a small window to enter it, and then you need white to be happy to enter it as well. As for refutations, I'm not aware of any. I mean, it's a strange position. The computer will always give white an advantage, but I don't think there is a line, especially after the knight already put to f3, that is considered to be like terminal for the Benoni. I hope that answers at least parts of your questions. Next one. Can we scroll up a bit on the screen? Ah, there we are, sorry. Spatri is saying, hi Jan, I got a question on the Nimzo-Larsen opening. What's that, 1b3? Ah yeah, 1b3, d5, bishop b2, d4. That doesn't sound right. Black gains space already. What should white do about this pawn, if anything? Play could go c4, e5, knight f3? No. Or 3 knight f3, c5, e3. Yep, that's more like it. But in any case, black seems to be building quite well in the center. How should white react? No, knight f3, c5, e3 looks good for white, doesn't it? Problem is, if black takes on e3, then all the space gaining was in vain. Just f takes e3 and white is better with extra pawn in the center and an open bishop on this long diagonal. Well, if you play the move, I'm assuming you have in mind, knight c6, then white has two tempting moves, the most principled maybe bishop to b5. And black is not in time to maintain his beautiful construction in the center. This pawn is hanging, you can't defend him with e5 because that guy would be hanging as well. So no, to d4 is a little overzealous. Black is not in time to do that just yet. I hope that answers the question. After d4, yeah, go knight f3 followed by e3 or e3 immediately, and white will undermine the center and emerge with a better position, which doesn't happen often after you go 1b3. Next question. Is it PLO or PL0? Not sure. PL021 is saying, hi Jan, could you tell me a safe, good way? Maybe there are two ways to play against the Sicilian Wings Gambit as black. Wow, that's literally an opening I've never looked at. The Wings Gambit, that's 2b4, giving you a pawn. I don't know. For starters, I think you can go b6. Just ignore it. And then it's very unclear that b4 was more useful than b6 for black. b4 for white was more useful than b6 for black. This bishop coming to b7 will hit the pawn. I think that's quite playable, but the principal way, of course, has to be takes. And after, what is the line? a3, d5, right? I've really never studied this in detail. This is what I've seen in some book. d5, e takes d5, queen takes d5, threatening queen e5 check. And I'm assuming that black is better here, frankly. Sorry, I'm not very educated on the topic. Knight of 3, e5, takes. I've never studied that because I've never faced 2b4 in my life or played anybody who had this in his repertoire. And frankly, I wouldn't worry about it. If people want to give you a pawn for really not an action development on the second move, just be thankful and accept it and don't spend too much time worrying about it. Spend that time working on your open Sicilian line of choice. I know this is not the answer you've been looking for. It's often a compromise with these gambits that if they don't seem to make a lot of sense, like 2b4 doesn't make a lot of sense to me, I decide not to spend a lot of time on it, because if you do worry too much about sidelines that you'll never get, or at least I think you'll never get, then you don't get anything serious done. Sorry for the answer, but yeah, in short, take the pawn and go d5 after a3 or after b4, b6. I think black is also fine. Up to you. Next one. Flo Power is saying, hey Jan, I just played a blitz game against the previous speaker, Raffaello, in which he came up with quite an interesting line in the modern Benoni. More modern Benoni stuff. The game went d4, hang on, let me put it on the board here, d4, knight f6, c4, c5, d5 I'm assuming, e6, knight c3, ed, cd, d6, knight f3, g6, bishop f4, a6, a4, very trendy line, bishop g7, a3, castles, e3. You quickly referred to the setup for white in your video series on 1d4. Yeah, I've had a look at this and said that you've analyzed this line a few times. Yeah, I know this stuff. Knight h5, bishop h2, f5. This is the one line you're hoping for if you're white. The critical line, in my opinion, is this stuff Gashimov played with knight e8 and knight bd7. But knight h5, bishop h2, f5, I think, is my new favorite word. Too overzealous. I don't think this works. Should be 2 f4. How's the line go? You castle. Don't go e4, even if the computer likes e4. No human should bury his bishop on h2 like that. Can't go e4. No, you want to punish black for his sins. Putting the knight on the rim, exposing his king with f5, f4. I think this is just good for white. The line I'm familiar with is something like knight d7, knight d2. This is a game between, who played the game? I think Humpi Koneru with black, I'm not sure. Ushenina Koneru, not 100% sure, but it was a high-level women's game. Knight d7, knight d2, takes, rook takes, queen takes, knight to e5, and white is much better. You just take both these knights, takes, knight to c4, and black is borderline losing here already. That might not be forced, but I did have a look at this line, and after f4 castles, white is seriously better. So I would advise not to play this knight h5, f5, and I would advise to go castles in this position. If that answers the question. There's more questions. Yeah, I think I answered them. Don't go e4, and yeah, I think white can claim an edge in this line. Next one, Tennis Boy. Oh, by the way, one thing I should address, I forgot to mention that. Illusion35 is saying, I hope we are covering the questions from part 1. We never got to. I am intending to do that. I'll go through the question from part 2 first from today, and then we'll move on to the list of questions that were left open the last time around. Can't promise I'll get through all of them. It's a 90-minute show, because that's as long as my voice lasts, but I will do my very best to cover what we can. And I think we're gonna do more of these, because I enjoy dressing up and talking about chess openings, and as long as there is demand, we'll do more shows. So as long as you're a Chess24 premium member, I will answer your question one day. Probably not to your satisfaction, but it will be addressed. Anyway, where were we? Tennis Boy. Dear Jan, my question is, what do you think of the Catalan Opening? Excellent opening. For a player that doesn't want to enter the complications of Bogo Indian and Nimzo. Well, I wouldn't be afraid of the Bogo, but yeah, it's a good opening. And how would you answer the Open Catalan? I don't know what the Open Catalan is. As often it's about move orders. Like the Bogo Indian, normally Catalan players start with knight f3. And that allows the Bogo Indian anyway. So you don't really stop the Bogo Indian by going for the Catalan after d5, g3. You can also start with the move g3 that, well, first of all, black could still play in Bogo Indian style with bishop b4 check. And secondly, after g3, you have to be even more ready for c5, these Benoni stuff we were talking about earlier. A lot of guys do that. If white committed to g3, then they think playing the Benoni is quite acceptable, and they play c5 here. So the few outings I've had as a Catalan player, I started with knight f3, and after d5 went g3. But then you have to be ready for b6 and bishop b4 check as well. So the Catalan is not a recipe to avoid everything, but it is an excellent addition to anybody's opening repertoire. I'm not sure what the open Catalan is. I'm sorry, I don't think I can answer that question. What do you mean? Is it so this line? I'm not sure. I'd go for the main line, queen c2, a6, and nowadays a4 is en vogue. That's where the theoretical battles are being held, and that's what I would do. But I'm not quite sure. The open Catalan could be something different. I'm not that good with opening names because quite often people don't use the same terminology. But yeah, excellent opening. By all means, add the Catalan to your repertoire. Passion, International Master, is having a couple of questions. I'm only allowed to answer one of them. So let's go with the first one. What's the simplest way to meet the King's Indian attack? Knight f3, d5, g3 for a Slav Queen's Gambit declined player. I'm not sure. This is becoming more serious stuff, Knight f3, d5, g3. Like for centuries, this setup, centuries might be overdoing it. The setup with bishop g4 was considered to be no problem for black whatsoever, either in this move order or 2 bishop g4 even, followed by knight d7. But it looks like white players have been going here a bit more. Even Kramnik, we've seen him dabble with d3, queen e1, e4 setups quite successfully. And then there's all these c4 ideas. So I'm not quite sure. This would be the natural choice, pawn structure-wise, for a Queen's Gambit declined Slav player. But it looks like white has been getting some ideas here. What I would do, but I don't think you're going to like it because it's not really in the Queen's Gambit Slav Catalan territory, is play the move g6, but then you have to be ready for some symmetrical Grunfelds. This is the solution of Vishy Anand, and I was quite impressed with how he handled this knight f3, d5, g3 stuff, getting good positions with his d5, g6 setup. Third option you have, which I've also played a bit, which would fit with your Queen's Gambit repertoire, is just to play bishop g2, e6, very boringly, castles, bishop e7. I've done that, like, if they go d3, e4, I think white doesn't have anything special. Of course, this is a serious line, but black is okay here, either starting with b6 or playing the main line with castle e4, c5. Of course, now white can try to move order you into a line of the Catalan you might not be comfortable with d4 here, or do this stuff Kramnik has been doing with b3, but I don't think this is too scary. I think he's just using it to get a position, and this is a decent starting position. So no easy way out. This knight f3, d5, g3 is becoming a lot more popular. Personally, I like the move g6, but that doesn't fit for Queen's Gambit declined Slav players. So make your choice between this bishop g4, c6 stuff or knight f6, e6 stuff. I have one last line, which I think is not bad, actually. I'll give you that one as well. d5, g3. It's just play bishop f5. I think this is quite solid as well. Then next move you play h6, then you play e6, then you play bishop e7, and you take it from there. I think this is a decent line, a little underrated actually. I don't think black has any particular problems here. So yeah, those are the lines I would choose from. Maybe actually, now that I thought of it, this bishop f5 is a decent choice. I hope that, yeah, gave you some ideas. Probably you knew all this stuff. Anyway, moving on. Dr. Boki, what is Dr. Boki saying? What is, in your opinion, the best way to proceed with black in the position from the Scotch with 4 knight f6? Oh, that's one of my hobbies, 4 knight f6 Scotch. Let's put it on the board. Knight takes c6, b takes c, e5, queen e7, queen e2, knight d5, knight d2, g6. c4 is a main line here, but knight d2 is a serious alternative. I like this question, it's very detailed. Knight d2, g6, c4, and this is actually a critical line. Bishop a6, I play that to knight f3. And what should black do here? Queen b4, knight b6, queen b4, or maybe f6? It's a good question. I keep changing my mind here like every other day. I think bishop g7 is a decent move. I don't like f6 so much because long term these endgames could become a little tricky with a 3 against 2. I think Caruana once beat Kramnik in that stuff. But I think queen b4 check is the best move. And after king to d1, white has tried all kinds of things. Black has tried all kinds of things here. The move I currently like is the move bishop g7. And I think black is totally fine. Like I mentioned in the very first question, I don't think the Scottish is all that scary, and I'm always a bit surprised if they go for these lines. After bishop g7, it looks like white's best move is the move queen d2, going for an endgame. But I don't think it's scary at all. You take, bishop takes, knight to b6. This knight can often be clumsy here, but here black is in time to get in c5, d5, and reach a good position. Let's say b3, castles, king c2, d5. This is the main line in my file at least. C takes d, bishop f1, rook takes, and c takes d5. And black, if anything, is slightly better. So I think this is the best way to play, but people would argue about that, and they could because black has many decent options here. Rook b8 is a decent move. Knight b6 is a decent move. I think computer gives some crazy lines like c5 here even. But I believe queen b4 check and then bishop g7 is totally fine for black. Some other tries here like queen c2, but that's just playing with fire. Knight b6, b3 castles, and with this king on d1, it's very, very hard for me to believe white wants to play like this. So I hope that answers it. At the moment, I believe queen b4 check and bishop g7 is totally fine for black. Moving on. All-Star is saying, "Hi Jan, I would be interested to know what you think black's best option against the Maroczy Bind in the Accelerated Dragon is currently. Don't go there." In the endgame line of the Gurgenidze, which I currently play, once again, I struggle with opening names. It's easier if you give me moves, but I think I know what you mean. It seems black has no hope of winning and is holding the worst side of a draw. I agree. I don't want to have to drop the opening from my repertoire, but against decent title players, I can't seem to find a good battleground. That is a problem. The Maroczy Bind is a solid opening, and if black knows what he's doing, this is a very decent way to equalize and hold your own, even against strong players, but it is not a way to play for a win against someone who's prepared. White just grabs extra space, and there is no realistic scenario to get a fighting position here. At least none that I'm aware of. I'm assuming by Gurgenidze you mean this line. I'm sorry if I'm not very firm with the terms. How does it go? Bishop e3, castles, queen d2. See, I don't even know the moves. Bishop e6. I can't even remember the moves, I'm sorry. What? My statement still is true. How do they play this? c1, queen a5, b3. This is rook fc8, f3, a6, this stuff, right? And knight a4. I'm assuming that's what you mean. I think even this endgame is alright for black. Takes, knight d7, g4, f5, these lines. Or even not playing f5. I think black should hold his own here. And you can certainly play this, but if you play this every game, I don't think there is much to do. And of course you could change lines and whatever, try bishop g7. But it's not going to change the character of the game. If people are prepared, it's going to be very hard to get a great position out of this. You can play it and be solid, this line you're choosing, and the other line is probably alright too. But it's not the best opening to put fire on board. Sorry if that's disappointing, but yeah, if you want something sharper, I would advise switching to another Sicilian. Play whatever you like. Play the Taimanov, play the Kalashnikov, play the Sveshnikov, something else, but the Accelerated Dragon, it's a bit limited, but it is a solid opening, so I'm not particularly against it. I played it quite a bit myself as a younger man, but I got a bit bored with the lack of strategic flexibility, or whatever we want to call it. Or maybe I just wasn't very good at playing it. So sorry, no, I don't have any particular recommendation there. Pero Amor, he had a question last time, but yeah, let's slide it for the extra effort. and go there. I don't speak English sometimes. Hello and thanks again, Jan. I think Chess24 is moving in the right direction with all this new stuff. Very dynamic and very motivating. Thank you so much. By the way, I'm sure you guys noticed, tomorrow Super Grandmaster Peter Svidler is playing Banter Blitz against premium users at 5 p.m. So I recommend that show very highly. He's a funny guy and he actually knows some stuff about chess beyond openings, which I can't say about myself, but fortunately this show is about openings, so let's see what Pero Amor is asking. Oof, this is a long, unconcrete question. Back into technical matters. As a 1e5 player against King's Pawn, you surely have been taken into account the numerous efforts of white side players to avoid the two big threats of Marshall and Berlin Wall. Yeah, I am aware of that. What would you say are the new trends that may have their say in the upcoming times? I don't know, I don't see much. Maybe just refining the Ruy Lopez? Yeah, I think the Ruy Lopez will always be the main battleground, be it ways to avoid the main lines of the Berlin or the Marshall, and there have been quite some after knight of 6, d3. I don't think this territory is exhausted, and similarly in the Marshall, well, there's a lot of pieces on the board. d3 was a big trend, and there's new lines popping up all the time. Everything else people do, I don't know, I'm happy to see it. I think bishop b5 is the best move. What about new ideas in the Scotch here? We mentioned the Scotch earlier. I think black is all right. Azerbaijani Vienna with knight c3 and g3. Gotta admit, I've never spent much time looking at it. I'm sure it's a way to get a game. It doesn't look very threatening, let's say. In general, if white goes to knight c3, he's not attacking anything. Like knight f3 and bishop b5 just strikes me as a lot more natural way to play the opening. Here, I can't claim I'm a big expert. I think black is alright after d5, but I haven't followed latest trends, I have to admit. What else is there? This is like 18 different questions hidden in one. Anything interesting out of the latest tries by Caruana and others in the Italian game? Not that I've seen. And yeah, no people play Carlsen's Ponziani. I agree, it's not a very good opening. So no, I think the Ruy Lopez is still the main battleground. I haven't seen any other trends outside of it that I found overly scary, but I'll keep my eye on it and see what's going on there. Grizzly Grisou is saying, hi Jan, can you tell me a good setup against the following openings? Bert Larsen, 1f4 with black. Didn't we have that question in the last show or something like it? I don't know, a lot of people seem to be concerned about 1f4. It's a move I think I've literally never faced throughout my whole chess career. So once again, it's something I have not given a lot of thought. Generally, if you play d5 and then after knight f3, you go g6, bishop g7, just play, yeah, then knight f6, castles and c5 against pretty much everything. You'll be in a decent spot and you'll be at least equal. It doesn't matter that you're a tempo down compared to the Dutch defense. It's one shortcoming many outplay my black defense as white lines have. Even if you're a tempo up, this is a defense and you're not better with the extra tempo. So frankly, no, 1f4 is a move, I don't know, just haven't lost a lot of sleep over. I'm sure g6 is an excellent reply as well, or c5, but I just go d5 and g6. One line I learned as a kid. So if they go e3 here, play a setup like this. I have no idea, I haven't checked this since childhood, but I really liked it back then. Say they go something like this. Now you take and go e5, and we want to go bishop d6, and long castle, they take on e5. We will find a way to checkmate them by playing h5 and knight eg4. So I don't think this is particularly useful, it's just a line that occurred to me now. But I would probably just be boring and play g6, bishop g7, knight f6, and say, I don't know, I like my position. I don't mean to disrespect all these minor openings, by the way, all these b3s and 1f4. If that's your weapon of choice, by all means, go for it. I just haven't spent a lot of time on them, because I don't think they are dangerous to meet if I ever met them, and because I haven't had to prepare them very often from the black side or been attracted to them from the white side. So I'm sorry I don't have any deep insights there. I'm advised to only answer one question, but I think later on we have another question about the the Old Indian, so maybe we'll get to that one. Timmy90 is saying, hey Jan, can you give me a few good plans, I'm assuming, how black plays best against e4, c5, knight f3, d6, bishop c4? Yeah, I know that line actually. Believe it or not, I sometimes play the Sicilian, and I've played 2d6 quite a bit. So you go knight f6, white players will play d3 to defend this pawn. Now you go knight c6, when normally they play the move c3 if they're less careful and castle. Then you go bishop g4, and your plan is just to go e6, bishop e7, d5 at the opportune moment, and you're fine. So normally they go c3, hoping that you go bishop g4, which now would run into queen b3 with a double attack. So don't do that. Instead, play the move a6. This is the key move. First side, it takes the b5 square under control, which is surprisingly sneaky because if white were to castle now, you go knight a5, you win this bishop for a knight. White should not allow that. Therefore, after a6, what they will do is play bishop back to b3 in order to be able to answer this with bishop c2. But now you can go bishop g4 since there's no longer queen b3. And black is fine. Normally play develops something like this. I don't know, bishop e7. With a complex maneuvering struggle ahead, but with this bishop out, I don't think black has any problems whatsoever. So yeah, that's what I would do. DF is saying, hey Jan, first of all, thank you for the amazing show. Thank you. What do you think about d4, d5, c4, c6, knight f3, knight f6, knight c3, dc line? Yeah, that's a serious main line, the Slav. I play this line with white and usually continue a4, bishop f5, knight e5. Yep, I've done that. Aiming for the well-known variation where black sacrifices a piece with e6, bishop b4. Gotcha. But I'm not so sure about what to do after knight bd7, knight takes c4, knight b6, knight e5, and a5. Yeah, this is a solid line for black. Me personally, I'm more concerned about queen c7, but knight b6 is certainly solid as well. Knight e5, a5. Yeah, all the moves you've mentioned, f3, e3, g3, bishop g5 are playable. I think currently they are trying this, right? f3, knight fd7, knight takes, e4, bishop g6, bishop to e2, where it looks like white has decent chances to get a small edge. One important line was queen b6, planning e5, then white goes f4, and it seemed like he's better, threatening f5, and after e6 castles. Looked like white had an edge here, so black normally just goes e6, but this position also struck me as a little more pleasant for white. Castles bishop b4, will they play bishop e3, I think, castles queen b3. That's not a lot, but white is a little better, so yeah, it's not a line I would be overly concerned about, and I would try this f3 move at the moment, if that helps. Thanks for your question. Phoenix 2K. Didn't he already ask a question? Maybe not. A lot of guys called Phoenix. Moin Jan. He says moin again. Didn't we have a question by that guy? I can't remember. I'll give you the benefit of the doubt because of my lousy memory. In the Queen's Gambit with bishop f4, why do all top players choose the main lane 6e3 instead of the alternatives 6a3 or 6 rook c1? Oof, this is a serious question. And what is this, your opinion on the current state of theory in the main line e3, knight bd7, c5, knight h5? Well, I could give a 2-hour lecture on this topic. In fact, I'm still planning to do a video series on that one, so I won't spoil all my material here, but I'll give you the gist. After a3, I think black is fine after b6. b6 has always been the main problem for me. When c takes d5, knight takes d5, I think is nothing. And similarly, after e3, c5, I think there's also nothing for white. Rook c1 is a more tricky move. I've played this one in this move order or others. I believe the reason they're not going here is black has some options. After c5, dc5, dc4 is supposed to equalize. I would thought bishop takes c5 was fine. e3, knight c6, what do they do? a3 and d4. I think this line is okay for black if he's prepared. It's quite concrete stuff. But yeah, I don't think against a prepared opponent you can get much here. Apart from that, after rook c1, Caro-Kann has even been doing alright with knight bd7. So there's a reason why top players are playing e3, knight bd7, c5. And yeah, knight h5, I think I've done some videos on this in this Anand Nakamura game where I've given, well, not really my opinion, but my opinion on what Anand thinks, which is more valuable to these positions. I think, well, objectively black should hold, but it's not a very pleasant experience at the moment to defend this, and there's a reason like guys like Anand are comfortable going here. And there's also a reason that a lot of guys aren't playing the Queen's Gambit declined, but are playing Bishop b4 here instead. So it seems to me like there is some hope for white in these lines, but that, of course, could change very quickly. MP Acher is saying, hello Jan, you're both funny and educative in one, which is rare to see. Thank you so much. I haven't made a lot of jokes today yet. I don't know any jokes. Anyway, I got a question about Sveshnikov. Why is it so out of fashion? I know it's a mess of possibilities. When mostly white chooses the line to play, therefore a bit unpractical. Yep, that's fair. But still, it's a very rich opening. Some years ago, black seemed to be in trouble in the c4 line. But now it seems to be at least somewhat solved. Yep, agree. Is there a line nowadays due to which black players avoid the Sveshnikov, or what is the reason for its low popularity? I don't think it's refuted. I think, as you mentioned, it's a little unpractical, mainly because you also have to be ready for 3 bishop b5 and 3 knight c3, but especially 3 bishop b5 arguably gives white as good a chance for an advantage as any of this open Sicilians. And top players, at least, I think they just prefer defending the e4, e5 territory or going for the knight off where they know they'll get a sharper fight instead of the Sveshnikov. For the Sveshnikov itself, yeah, like I said, I don't think it's refuted. There's some questions black has to answer in, well, in the main line. Bishop g5, a6, knight f3, b5, knight d5 seems to be the way to go. Bishop e7, bishop f6, bishop f6. I agree, c4 is not that scary. c3 is a bit tricky nowadays, or maybe not too tricky. After castles, knight c2, bishop g5, a4. Looked like white was getting somewhere. Check this game, Giri against Shirov, that looked very scary. So the line, yeah, which I think is critical is this weird move, rook b8. Oh no, sorry, I think you start with bishop g5. You can start with whatever you want. Knight c2 and rook to b8, which seemed to be holding. There was some games by, I don't know, Dominguez against Grishuk. So I think all these lines are holding, but it is a bit a walk on the tightrope for black. So I understand that it's not that popular, but I also believe it's a playable opening. Why wouldn't it be? So if you want to play it, by all means. Taki is saying, hey Jan, which Sicilian variations do you recommend to use to smash weaker opponents? Is the accelerated dragon a viable option? No, I don't think that's the best choice. We've had that earlier. It's a bit hard to gain winning chances with the accelerated dragon. I don't know. Like, I've used the proper dragon once in a while, but I also don't think that's that great to smash weaker opponents. I would probably recommend the Taimanov nowadays. Knight c6, knight c3, queen c7. I think that's very rich in play, very unbalanced, not that theoretical, and a good hunting ground for smashing those weaker opponents. Or, yeah, even the Khan, which I think is critical against the Super Grandmaster. Against weaker opponents, it's once again very unconcrete, unbalanced structure, which I think is decent to play for a win. However, you gotta know what to do against c4 nowadays. So my recommendation would be the Taimanov, and if I found a bit more time to study it, I'd probably pick it up myself. But there is a lot of options. I won't say anything against the Najdorf, against the Sveshnikov, against any major line, but the accelerated dragon as a way to beat weaker opponent doesn't strike me as a good choice. Peter ST is saying, hi Jan, the opening clinic is a great show. Thank you so much. I have a very specific question about the Ruy Lopez with 6d3. After 6 c3 castles, rook e1, b5, bishop c2, d5, knight bd2. Anyway, this is specific stuff. I've seen this question earlier. Let's see if we can put it on the board. I believe this is from Peter Svidler's video series on the 6d3 Spanish. This line, right? Hang on. How does it go? Oh no, I'm sorry. Knight bd2, b5, bishop c2, d5, rook e1, d4. Good luck ever getting that on the board, by the way, but I like it that you're studying stuff in detail. So I'll answer to the best of my knowledge, which is not very big. Bishop h3, bishop h5, g4, bishop g6. This is the position we're talking about. Peter Svidler suggests c takes d. And how does his line continue? E takes d, bishop to b3. And now his line continues rook b8, ab, ab, knight f1, knight b4. Okay. I think he showed me this stuff, yeah. Rook c8, there was some weird knight move, knight to b1. Which, yeah, once again, good luck ever getting that on the board. But what are you disliking? That I don't get. You're saying rook c8, knight b1, and now rook b8. But this knight regroupment is excellent. You go knight a3, and it looks to me like this has been very useful for white to include, and getting this knight to a3, where it's putting pressure on this construction, and more importantly, clearing the way for the bishop to come out to f4, looks like an achievement. And you could absolutely argue if this knight was better on f1 than on b1. I'd rather have it on a3, controlling the queen side. So I'm not quite sure what you dislike. My computer also gives an edge for white here. I don't know. I think we can trust Mr. Svidler on that one. And yeah, his main line with rook b8 immediately strikes me as better than rook c8. So no, I wouldn't worry about that one. And once again, I think it's useful to have looked at this and to have a grasp on the position, which is very complicated, but it's something that's unlikely to ever happen in any of your games, especially this blend with d5 followed by d4. I don't think is very popular. I hope that answers us though. Else, yeah, we can try to ask Svidler one day. Next question. Neo2381. Is that your FIDE rating? No, it doesn't look like. Hi Jan. Although I know the chess rules for all my life, that's quite a long time, I'm quite new to the game competitively speaking. Most obvious proof is my blitz rating on this very side, which is below 1500. Hang in there, there's a lot of sharks on this very side. I haven't played in clubs or tournament yet, but I think about it for the near future. Anyway, my question is less precise but much more basic. Since I'm very far from having a certain repertoire, simply because I do not know all the possibilities yet, I wonder which is the best way to build one. What is your advice for a beginner like myself? Should I try out as many openings as possible and stick to the lines I like best? Or should I focus on certain openings and try to concentrate on getting used to the main lines there? For the record, long question. I tried to play Ruy Lopez with white and neither of Nimzo or Bogoinium with black. That sounds like a fine repertoire. I never try 1d4 with white or something like the French or Caro-Kann defense. And you can have a fine chess career without ever touching, especially the French or the Caro-Kann. What do you say? Stick to those and try to master them, or try out as many openings as possible? I don't think there's a correct answer to that one. As dumb as it may sound, whatever suits you best. The one thing is, if you're just starting out, tactics are more important than opening. I know this is a tired cliche and I'm all about openings, but it is true. So the more time you can get in, whatever, in our tactics trainer or solving exercises or just thinking about stuff, will be better used than openings. As for the repertoire, your repertoire sounds fine, and I think both approaches you mentioned make a lot of sense. If you're less concerned about short-term results, I would probably have fun and try to experiment with everything. Play d4, e4, play different openings with black, and then see what suits you, where you get decent positions, where you feel like working on. Well, if you want to have a repertoire and build on it, then it's very fine doing that. When I started out, I had one book which was called Kasparov's Chess Openings, and I played the repertoire it gave for quite a while until I realized King's Indian wasn't really my cup of tea. But I think both approaches are suitable, and the repertoire, the lines you mentioned, sound fine to me. If you're just sticking with those for now, you'll be all right. We have a question by International Master Lawrence Trent. Wow, an International Master. Hi Jan, should I incorporate the Grobb 1G4 into my repertoire? Will this bring me better results? I think so, yeah, you should give that some thought. I have no idea why this is not played at top level. Perhaps you could explain. I don't know. I think if anybody can bring the Grobb, the move 1G4, which for most people it's very hard to compensate for weakening your king on the first move and not contributing to development. But if it's paired with a slightly goofy personality and angry looks, I think you can pull it off, and I would recommend you playing this line, especially because there's many tricks you can get in. The d5, bishop to g2, this is the move you want to play. Bishop takes g4. c4, white already has a ton of fascinating options. For example, c6, c takes d, queen to b3, double attack against these 2 pawns. And if black plays the natural move, e6, guess what happens? You go queen a4 check, and this bishop is lost because there's no longer queen d7 or bishop d7. So you could win out of the opening. And I could see this happening a lot in your games, so by all means go for 1G4. You might get unlucky and they might play knight f6 here once in a while and you're busted, but that is a risk very much worth taking for all the fun you get to have. Disclaimer for everybody, this was not serious advice, it was only useful advice for International Master Lawrence Trent. Everybody else, stay away from 1G4, it's a horrible move, doesn't make any sense, don't do it. No offense to Mr. Bazman. Moving on, thanks a lot Lawrence for contributing. It's not like you have real opening problems. This next comment, Jan is taller than the door. I don't know, I can't answer that question. I think it depends which door. Probably the one on the picture. I'm very tall. Bill1226 is saying, Jan, here's my question from the first clinic that you didn't get a chance to address. Could you comment on the pluses and minuses, biggest challenges to obtaining an advantage of the pure Rati approach as white with one knight f3? Generally including b3. That's a pure Rati approach? I don't think so. Though not in every line, of course. In my opinion, the most difficult problems for white are knight f3, d5, c4. Yeah, I wouldn't do that. d4, I agree with the reverse Benoni. I think black is fine here, and most white players don't go here. Nowadays, if they don't want to go d5, d4, you see them playing g3, bishop g2. We had an earlier question about that, which is quite tricky, keeping c4 or b3 stuff in reserve. Yeah, I agree basically. After c4, both d4 and d takes c4. This is a little less known, but I think it's quite good as well. e3, bishop e6. I don't think white gains an opening advantage here. Yeah, then the later point that, of course, it's tough to gain opening advantage against anything is very true, and black is probably also less booked up. However, yeah, I wouldn't be comfortable conceding all this space on the second move, so I would not play 2c4, but that's, of course, my personal opinion. Any plans for a Rati English video series? It's huge territory, so many transpositions, and me personally, at least, I've never been a specialist on pure Rati English stuff, so not really, sorry. But if there is enough popular demand, we'll certainly think about it. I think those were all the questions from today's opening thing. Who thought of that stupid name? Anyway, I think those were all the questions from today, and we will, after a brief break, which I used to drink my coffee, 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 which I used to shit, but I'll stick to the guys in the comments for now, because there's just too much stuff to get through. All this opening knowledge has to leave my brain. Let's check in with the chat. Lawrence appreciates my advice. I'm happy I could teach you that little trick, like picking up the bishop on g4 will score you a lot of points, which you will need on your way to the Grandmaster title. So you're very welcome. Lasker Century is saying, Jan actually played against the Bird Larsen at least once. Did I lie that I never faced it? Against me at a youth tournament in the Netherlands about 20 years ago. Sorry, I did not recall that game. After something like f4, d5, b3, c5, e3, knight c6, bishop b5, I actually got a pretty good Nimzo type position, but lost the game later. Sorry, could not remember that game, but I'll believe you. Yeah. Time flies, 20 years ago. How old was I, like 3? That doesn't make any sense. Yes, some stuff going on in the chat, but I'm afraid I have to go back to comments duty. What we got next here? Oh, we got to address that before we move on. Grusek is saying, Jan, if you were allowed, ask for how would you change Mr. Trent's opening repertoire in order to help him get his final GM norm? First of all, there's an assumption in here that I want to help him get his final GM norm, which I'm not sure, Lawrence being a Grandmaster, would make him a more pleasant or less pleasant co-host. But seriously, there's a lot of stuff to do in Lawrence Trent's opening repertoire. His problem is there's too many tricky sidelines. Should be more main lines, less tricky sidelines. Because the tricky sidelines, you can only use them once or twice. Main lines, you can use them all your life. Give a man a fish and he will eat for a day. Teach a man to fish and he will eat for, I don't know, like whenever he catches a fish. Timeless wisdom there. Let's move on. What we got? Are we on the... Ah, yeah, sorry. Which one is next? Surya 22? Oof, that's a very general question. Hello, sir. I want to know the current experts of the openings I play. I want you to name some experts, young or old, 2500 or 2600 or 2700 players who play tournaments regularly with my openings so that I can follow their games and use their novelties or the lines played by experts in my own games. It's a decent approach, actually. Choose heroes. I played these lines from white. I play 1 e4, Ruy Lopez, French, knight c3, open Sicilian, knight f3, advanced Caro-Kann. So you play all the absolute main lines, which is a good approach, but then it should be easy for you to find experts, because all the top players play the absolute main lines too. Name that would come to my mind is Karana, for example. I'm sure he plays all these openings with white. Check out what he's doing. From black I play Sicilian Najdorf and King's Indian Defense. Also absolute main lines, very competitive. Well, the experts there. Najdorf, well, as always, Gelfand and Dominguez. They're probably the two biggest experts. But these ranks are growing. Sorry. A lot of guys you can track for the Najdorf. Nakamura, Nepomniachtchi. A lot of experts out there. Najdorf is becoming very, very popular again. Vishy has been playing it a bit. He knows his stuff there. King's Indian Defense, similar list of names. Nakamura, big expert. Rajabov, big expert. Ding Liren is becoming a big expert. So those are some of the names I would come up with. And yeah, 1 e4 main lines. I think everybody who's an e4 player plays that. So I'm sorry I don't have any great role models there. Check the strongest players. Caruana, Topalov, Magnus Carlsen. Well, he's not much of an opening guy, admittedly, but there is no shortage of information if you're playing the main lines. Hope that helped. Probably didn't all that much. But what are you going to do? What's the next question? Avorton. Hello, Jan. My second and last question deals with the open Sicilian variations. Oof, this is a strange question. Well, I'll try. With black playing the typical b5 and b4, asking a question to the knight on c3, I'm assuming you mean. The thing is that with white after knight a4, I'm always scared of being trapped because of a potential bishop d7 or queen a5. A lot of ladders here. On the other hand, I feel that retreating it to e2 is too slow and that black's attack can be actually faster than white's. Is it just a matter of calculation or is there a theoretical solution to this problem? Thanks. Sorry, I can't help you out there. You would have to give me a specific position. Else, yeah, I'm going to have to tell you it depends. In some positions, knight a4 is correct. In some positions, knight e2 is correct. In some positions, it's correct to go a3, not even allowing b4. So this is too general. There is no rules for such concrete stuff. It depends. I'm sorry. Can't help you out there much. It's, yeah, matter of calculation, if you want to call it that. Moving on, Tobu97 is saying, hello Jan. Is he saying hello? Yeah, he's saying hello. I play Caro-Kann. Sorry to hear that. My voice is letting me down a bit. We'll get there. And I faced the weird looking line d4, d5, f3. Why is it so weird looking? I think it's quite a natural move actually, trying to maintain the full pawn center. I think this move can't be that good. I disagree once again, but I don't know what to do after f3. I think it's a good move. What do you think is the best move after f3? Thanks. I've changed my opinion on this topic recently. I used to think queen b6 was really good, but now I'm not so sure anymore after knight c3, de. First of all, knight takes e4, as dumb as it looks. It's not that silly. And secondly, after f takes e4, it looks like white has quite some tricky lines as well. So I'm not a big believer in queen b6 at the moment. I think the main line, the old main line here, is what you should play. e6, knight c3, bishop b4. Normally play something like bishop f4, you go knight to e7, they go queen d3, I believe, b6, knight e2, bishop a6, queen e3. I think this is the main line, and here the immediate c5 could be interesting, but normally they start with castles, long castles, c5. I think this is fine for black. a3, how's it go? Takes, takes, take, and knight to d7. I believe black is okay here, so I think this is the way to go. Of course, there's some deviations along the line, but I think this is the main line and the way black should play. But yeah, as I mentioned, f3, in my opinion, is quite a serious move. It's trying to maintain the perfect pawn center, so it should be treated with respect. Real Burke is saying, hi Jan, what is your opinion about Veresov opening? What's that, 2 knight c3? Ah yeah, d4, d5, knight c3. And lo, it looks ugly to me. Blocking your c-pawn before you played c4 just doesn't feel right. Of course, white is fine, but I think this helps black in his task of equalizing the game. Knight f6 was the best way to deal with it. Well, here it depends if white goes bishop f4 or bishop g5. The bishop g5, I like the move knight bd7. Only one trick I know here, but I think black is fine. c6 takes, takes, e5 takes. Queen to a5. Well, I think black is better already. One trick I like here. It's not very relevant, I'll show you anyway. Takes, takes, bishop c4. This is what they normally play. But here black has the move bishop to a3, which seems to be kind of winning on the spot. This position I once had in a tournament game. I missed bishop a3. I still won after knight e5 because this position is good for black. But bishop a3 is always a trick I cherished. Instead, normally nowadays I go bishop f4, when I think the best way to play is c5, e3, c takes d, e takes d, a6, when we have some kind of Chigurin position with colors reversed, where I think black is absolutely fine getting these pieces out. With an approximately equal position. That's my opinion. I'm sorry, I'm only allowed to answer one part per question. Those were the rules. So I'm moving on to Mr. Hochjoch, or Hochjoch. I'm not quite sure how it's pronounced. Hi Jan, I'm worried about the sideline and the Caro-Kann. The good old Caro-Kann. I haven't played that for a while. But I haven't been worried about the sidelines. I've been more worried about the main lines. Let's put Mr. Hochjoch's worry on the board. Knight g3, bishop g6. How to go? Knight 1 e2, knight f6, h4, h6, knight f4, bishop h7, bishop to c4, yeah, e6, castles, and bishop d6. Yeah, that's all theory. Why are you worried about it? There are knight takes e6, Talbot Winnick, and knight fh5, castles, bishop g5. Knight fh5, castles, bishop g5? That doesn't seem to work, right? Knight fh5, castles, bishop g5, you just take and you're winning. This does not work, so there's one worry less. The other one is more serious, but this is a line I once checked. I think it doesn't work for white. knight takes, pawn takes, bishop takes. You go knight bd7 or queen c7 first. I think they transpose. White goes rook e1, and here the key is ignoring the discovered check that is about to come. Just play queen c7. Now, there's no lethal discovered check. If you manage to castle away, you'll be fine, and therefore white has to give a check, but it doesn't win. Actually, I think black is better here. Bishop g8 check, king f8, bishop h7, rook h7. This stuff has been played, knight to f5. And here, I think g6 was the main line, but you can give a check, king h1, bishop f4. If you feed this position to your computer, I think he'll spit out that black is better. So I'm not quite sure what you're afraid of. You seem to know everything, and you're right. These lines are, this is a sideline, black is fine. Don't worry about it. Just play this stuff, and you'll be a piece up, which is always a good way to start a game. Kalashnikov is saying, "Hi Jan, what are the critical lines of the Morra Gambit?" Oof, more gambits. Morra Gambit I'm more familiar with than the Wings Gambit, at least. Too many questions, so I'll stick with the first one. What are the critical lines of the Morra Gambit? I played the Morra Gambit when I was a very little kid. Then I decided I don't want to play one e4 or give up a central pawn. When I'm facing it with black, I would probably just go knight f6 out of laziness, transposing to the c3 Sicilian, because I'm very familiar with this. But there are some critical lines which I know a bit about, actually. It's not as stupid as you would think, the Morra Gambit, because it gives up a whole pawn, but white has some tricks. One line which I thought was very good was this line with e6, a6, but I'm not so sure anymore. My idea was always to play this knight e7 and trying to bring this out here, but it seems like there's been something happening. How does the line go? Something like this. This I always thought was a very good line for black, but white has the move knight to d5 here, amazingly, and is putting some serious pressure on black, like scoring massive margins, if I'm not mistaken, which I'm not. So avoid this with black, or if you want to play the Morra Gambit, try to get in this trick. Another line I've always liked was to play queen c7, castles, knight to f6, hoping to get in this cheap trick, queen e2, which is natural, knight to g4, and now next move, knight to d4, winning on the spot. This has always been my main idea, because I was shown this as a little kid. And it's not a dumb line, but I think white also can do better here. They were doing something sharp, knight b5, queen b8, and e5, which looked like compensation, actually. So that's another line. The main line, I think, or how I would play with black if I wasn't lazy and went 3 knight f6, 4 knight f6, knight f6 at some point, is, I believe, this very dull setup. Just go d6, e6, knight f6, bishop e7. Well, we'll do this, rook d1. You go e5 to stop e5. And I don't think white has anything here. He might have some positional compensation, but it can never be more than enough for compensating for a pawn. Like normally I play h3, castles, bishop e3, bishop e6. And I just refuse to believe that white could ever be better here. So those are some of the lines I'm familiar with. I'm not sure those are the main lines, but yeah, there's Morra Gambit for you. It's not as silly as it looks, but it's also not something I believe one should be overly concerned about. So I hope that helped. I have to move on according to our new one question policy. 111 Marcel is not sure where to post this question. What do you think is the most critical line in the anti-Moscow right now? I've answered this question earlier, right? Your question was in the other thread as well, so we're moving on, sorry. Indomable is saying, "Hi Jan, what's your opinion on the setup d4, e4, c4, knight f3, g3, bishop g2? Well, if you get in all these moves, congratulations for starters against the King's Indian. I believe you mean the setup with, let's say, g6, knight f3, bishop g7, g3, castles, bishop g2. Normally you don't get an e4 there so quickly, that's why I was confused. I am having success with it lately. Then keep doing it. I think it's one of the absolute main lines. It's a very solid way for white to play. You're not going to get checkmated with your king here. Absolutely playable, by all means. Keep doing it. Seraphine is saying, could you please outline. Oof, we're covering a lot of different openings today. How to play with black in the Marshall mainline with 15 Queen D3, intending a Kramnik-like attempt with Queen F1 and following F3. I can. Should I? Maybe it should go into my Marshall series. That's not really a trendy line, so I'll just tell you. Oh, hang on, let's put the Marshall on the board. Rook E1, B5, Bishop B3, castles, C3, D5. Takes, 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 takes. By the way, I saw a question somewhere in the Marshall, C6 or knight F6. C6, just to answer that question along the way as well. C6, D4, Bishop D6, Rook E1, Queen H4, G3, Queen H3, and now Queen D3. In my Marshall series, I think I did a chapter on Queen E2, and my advice about Queen D3 would be try to transpose to stuff. Go Bishop G4. Bishop F5 might look tempting hitting the queen, but the queen wants to go to F1 anyway, so I prefer the move Bishop G4 here. And I don't think white is anything better than playing Queen F1, which transposes to Queen E2, Bishop G4, Queen F1, when, once again, I can refer you to my very clever series update. While, yeah, I don't think white is anything more useful. He can go Bishop E3, but that also transposes after Rook A8 to the line where white starts with Bishop E3 instead of Queen D3. So that's not helpful. And independent tries would be a move like, Bishop G4, A4. Well, that's just bad. Black goes Rook A8 and keeps developing his initiative. So this is nothing you want to try. After Queen F1 here, you just go Queen H5, and A4 is not a very useful move to have made. So I hope that answers your question. Just go Bishop G4, and it's going to transpose into something else. Moving on, Bluesy is saying, hi Jan, what is a refutation of the unknown? D4, D5, C4, C6. No, sorry, C takes D, C takes D. Sorry for messing with the move order here. If I am knight c3, knight f6, f3. It's not a terrible move. I don't think there's a reputation. When knight c6, e4, de is met with d5, well, 5 bishop f5 could be met by crazy stuff like g4, and computer seems to like it. Yeah, I don't like bishop f5 at all. I think g4, h4 is just good for white, gaining space. So I would go knight c6, and as you mentioned, after e4, take it, d5, knight to e5. And it looks to me like black is okay. I wouldn't call it a reputation. I think f3 is kind of playable. But here, after e6, black also does not seem to be in any trouble and is probably all right. So I think that's the line to look at. But yeah, f3 is not a dumb move. Very interesting little sideline. I hope that answers your question. Moving on, can we scroll a little bit? Here we are. Bill 1226. Didn't we have a Bill 1226 question earlier? Can't remember a thing. Anyways, from last session. Yeah, I answered this very question. All right. Holyfield, not a premium member. I'm going to mispronounce that. Somnat Mukherjee is saying, thanks Jan, really nice session. Should have given more details of the line I usually play against the London system. Yeah, I think you asked the question in the last show how to deal with the London system, which, yes, no problem. The line you're mentioning, d4, knight f6, knight f3, d5, bishop f4, c5, I think is an excellent way to play, and that's all you need to know, really. e3, knight c6, the c3, queen b6 is good, but you can also play other moves. You can also play moves like bishop g4. I don't see anything wrong with that. So yeah, I wouldn't be too concerned about the London question, the London system, sorry. And yeah, as you suggested, I will check Robin's King's Indian Defense videos. By all means do that. That's a good series by our boy, Mr. Van Kempen. So have a look at that one. And don't be too afraid of the London system. There's a lot of other stuff out there to panic about. Did we cover everything? Are we through? Is this it? Beautiful. A lot of chess openings out there. Once again, it's been fun. Let me check in with the chat. Is anybody still awake? Doesn't look like. Yeah, Bill is saying yes, already answered. Hume is saying only premium members can ask Jan, which, yeah, strikes me as quite fair. If it's my mission to solve all you guys' opening problems, you should be a premium member. Not sure how good of a job I'm doing, but I do enjoy openings and wearing ties. So let's keep doing this. If there's no further questions, we can quit already. Did I finally answer everything? Let's see if there's something in the chat. Sometimes people posted something here. Lokander is saying, hi Jan, heard you like praise, so good job, thanks a lot. Honestly though, really like your work, thanks again. I'm playing a tournament in a few weeks where I expect many opponents to play kind of King's Indian defense as black but avoiding theory. Sounds perfect. Like playing King's Indian but not knowing stuff that normally is clumsy setups with, let's say, knight to d7 or c6 or whatnot, right? Just play the main line. Sit there, play this. If they want to go knight bd7, let them do it. Let them suffer. Bishop e3, for example, is a good move here. Why is just better? c6, d5, c5, knight e1. So yeah, these guys will always be around who play King's Indian and avoid theory, or who play d4. Well, that's actually more common. d4, g6, c4, bishop g7, and start thinking then. But even me, as not a big fan of the King's Indian, I normally welcome those guys. I'm more afraid of the guys who are going for the King's Indian main lines. If your opponent plays something like this and starts thinking here, that's a good thing. So I wouldn't be too concerned about it. Just prepare for what they normally do. It's hard to answer generally. It's always a question of the move here. If they go e5, de5, something you might want to study where white could be better. e5, e4 is also possible. Knight d7, e4, e5, bishop e2. And yeah, you got to know some stuff like here, but knight e7, for example. I think h4 is a good move. So there's some subtleties to know, where you can normally find that out by checking what exactly they do. And I'd be happy about it. Just develop your pieces to the center and take it from there. Not sure that really helped, but as you said yourself, if guys avoid theory, you can't win in the opening in a theory battle, but you get a good position, and that's, as dumb as it sounds, it's the goal of the opening. I mean, I try to win in a theory battle without thinking, but it doesn't work most of the time. We got some old questions by guys who asked more than one question, who we will use the last 5 minutes to address those. Reich is saying, it's a question about the Stonewall. I think I said something about the Stonewall last session, that I said I don't like facing it. No, I wouldn't mind facing the Stonewall. The thing is just, if you know your opponent is a Stonewall player, and I think I said the last time, same thing last time, I would try to make their lives more complicated by starting with knight f3, g3, c4, and holding the d pawn back, because against the Stonewall, if you haven't played d4 yet, this d3, knight c3, e4 plan can be quite powerful. But no, I think in the main lines of the Stonewall, white has decent chances for an advantage. In this Anand Carlsen game, in the line Avro recommends, many lines that are pleasant for white, so no, I'm not too afraid of it. If that helped. Hopefully it helped to scare people away from playing the Stonewall against me. It's another very concrete question by Reich. I'm not going to go into it in detail because we don't have the time. It's about the Benoni with g3. And yeah, I agree with everything you say there. I wouldn't recommend the g3 Benoni for white, and those lines you are giving, they seem okay for black everywhere. So yeah, I'm with you. Don't go there. And as for guidelines, now there are no guidelines. This is concrete stuff. But I've never been a big fan of the g3 Benoni, which some people do for repertoire purposes. I understand that. That's why Avruch is recommending it in his book, because he needs it to fit into this repertoire. But I'm more of an advocate of being flexible, and if your opponent is a Benoni player, then play knight c3, and after c5, d5, choose a line that is more promising than stuff with knight f3, g3. So yeah, that's about it. Then I think we can wrap up for today, because my voice is slowly disappearing anyway. Thank you guys for watching, listening. This is a bit of a quick format. Once again, post your complaints in the chat if you want me to go into more detail, less detail, take more breaks, less breaks, have more dots on my tie, less dots, less ties in general. Let me know what you guys need. Thanks for posting your questions. Thanks for watching. I'll go get, what will I get? Probably food. And yeah, thanks for stopping by, San Diego. That didn't work, did it? I've seen the movie Anchorman too many times. It's a good movie. Just checking the chat. No, not much going on. Anna Andres wants to play some G4 practice games with Lawrence Trent after the show. I would recommend everybody to watch that. That's probably going to be a much bigger spectacle. Thanks, guys, for watching. We'll wrap up. Check out Peter Svidler's Banter Blitz tomorrow at 5 p.m. Central European Time, if I'm informed correctly. That's it for today's opening clinic. Beautiful name. Wasn't me who came up with that. And we'll do another episode at some point next week or something. Thanks for watching, everybody. Bye-bye.
Until recently, chess was like this. Chess24 brought you this. Live interactive broadcasts from top tournaments with computer analysis and video commentary by the likes of Jan Gustafsson, Lawrence Trent and Peter Svidler. A play zone where you can take on opponents from all around the world 24/7. Interactive beginners courses ensuring you pick up the basics fast while having fun. A tactics trainer to sharpen your chess by solving puzzles adapted to your level. Hundreds of interactive videos letting you watch and learn from star players such as Vishy Anand, Peter Svidler, Paco Vallejo and Hu Yifan. You've given up on that outdated computer? That's why there are more reasons to use Chess24 on mobiles and tablets. Full playzone access, including pre-move. A tactics trainer so you can stay sharp wherever you are. Computer opponents you can challenge even when you're not online. Live broadcasts of top chess events. And the half? It's free. Well, that's half true. Most features are free, but limited for registered members. For a mere €99 per year, however, you can step up to premium membership and gain unlimited access to our video library. That and much more. See you at chess24.com.